Hey everyone, Robbie here from Spiritus, and today's teaching is about how we share the gospel, how we fulfill the Great Commission. Our last teaching was our attempt to simplify and explain what is the gospel, what is this good news that we're supposed to be sharing. Now, the gospel itself is super simple, but at the same time super complex. I'm sure you've heard of the Great Exchange. Just kind of talks about all of the stuff that Jesus took from us and what he gave us in return. That's like the deep end of the gospel. I'd love to go into a teaching on that sometime, but today we're going to go even simpler than last week. I'm just going to share with you the basics of how we share the gospel. So let me go even further with simplifying the gospel and make it just 5 super simple, super short points. Sin separated us from God. There's nothing we could do to solve that problem. So God sent his son, Jesus, to die to pay the price for our sins. Then Jesus rose again to give us new life so that we would have a restored relationship with God our Father and right standing before him. That's awesome. And as a born-again believer, that excites me. The gospel is amazing. It is good news. But if you don't know Jesus and you think Christians are just a bunch of religious weirdos, does that not sound stale, dry, almost like a religious philosophy? There's nothing living and active about just that statement on its own. But we all know, all of us who know Jesus, we know that he is alive. He is alive and active. So how do we convey that to those that we're trying to share the gospel with? Well, before I get into that, I just want to read to you the foundational verses for what we as Christians call the Great Commission. I'm reading from Mark chapter 16, starting with verse 14. Starting with verse 15. And he said to them, "Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons, they will speak in new tongues, they will pick up serpents with their hands, and if they drink any deadly poison, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick, and they will recover." So that's where we get the Great Commission from. Jesus told his disciples to go into all the world and share the gospel. Now, when I look at even before the crucifixion and resurrection, even before there was really a gospel to share, when I look at people telling other people about Jesus, you don't see theological arguments or dry presentation of facts. You see something a little bit different. One of my favorite stories that illustrates this is found in John chapter 4. I'm sure many of you have heard it. For those of you who haven't, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but what happens is Jesus and his disciples are coming through Samaria. They stop at a well, and there's a woman there. Now, even though Jews and Samaritans don't talk, and men and women aren't supposed to socialize within the culture of the day, Jesus stops and he talks with this woman at the well. In the conversation, Jesus reveals to her things that no one would know about her, especially not someone who had just met her. She's amazed by this and realizes that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. So she runs into town and she tells everyone. She doesn't say, this man fulfills the prophecies that were spoken about the Messiah. She just says, hey, come and meet this guy, this Jesus, who told me everything I've ever done.
And what do we do, Lord?
But love one another, as I have loved you. This is the command I give you. But I also give you a mission. Go to Jerusalem. Judea, Samaria, go to the ends of the earth and tell them what you have seen. Tell them.
So we're to go into the world and tell them the good news. What is the good news? Well, we summed up the gospel, but for them to understand that, they have to know that Jesus is alive. The early church went around telling people that Jesus that was crucified, he is alive. He rose from the dead and is alive now. We have to tell people that. And this is the beauty of it. Sharing the gospel is super easy. It's just our job to tell people that Jesus is alive and that what he said is truth. It's not our job to convince them. Right? We just got to introduce them. You can't introduce them to Jesus if they don't think he's alive. So we have to show them a living and active Jesus. In order to do that, what works best, I find, is share with them what Jesus has done in our lives. Right? The gospel, in those 5 points we talked about at the beginning, might sound dry, but the Jesus who came into your life and took you from a place of darkness and brought you into a place of light, who transformed your life radically, that Jesus who's living and active, that's someone that you can introduce to your unsaved friends. So my suggestions for sharing the gospel is take a few minutes, pray about it, and just write out your story, your Jesus story. Right? Take a few sentences, nothing major, about who you were before Jesus, where you were, how lost and in darkness you were. Then talk about when you met Jesus. All of us believers had a moment in our lives where we met the risen Christ, like Paul on the road to Damascus. We've all had that experience in some way, shape, or form. So talk about that. Figure out, when was it? How did this happen? How did Jesus come into my life? Then, in another few sentences, just talk about, what is my life like now? What changes has Jesus brought into my life? And how is he still working on me? It doesn't have to be long. It shouldn't be a biography. You don't have to start from when you were born, right? This isn't your story. This is your story about Jesus. It's really your chapter in Jesus' ongoing story. Right? So once you have that, it's easy. People can connect with where you were before and hope to be where you are now. And maybe, just maybe, when their heart is ready, they'll meet Jesus and be transformed. So it's not scary. It's not difficult. You don't have to know much. You just have to know Jesus. That's all sharing the gospel is just telling people the good news about Jesus. I hope this has been helpful. I really hope this has been encouraging. If you have any questions, or if you want a hand figuring out how to make your Jesus story more pointed so that people don't nod off in the middle, then come talk to us. Send us an email, send us a Facebook message. If you know me personally, just show up at my door. I don't care. So yeah, just get out there and share the great news about Jesus with everyone who will listen. God bless you guys.